You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners, so let's be friends. We've got a news show for you this week. We'll take a detailed look at the 2024 calendar. We'll have a little bit of a late look at silly season, all kicked off by Vries. Is that the first domino to fall? And call me mad, but I'm going to pick a fight with Matt about tyres. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I'm joined in the shed by the king of podcasting tyres. He was talking about tyres when everyone was saying that it was boring. And did that stop him? No, it didn't. It's Matt Tyrumpets.
It was Marco and the AlphaTauri garage with a Daniel Ricciardo lap time.
I love that. We'll get into that. Who did it for Nick de Vries? Cluedo. It's a Cluedo reference. We're also joined by the future of British motorsport commentary. It's Chris Stevens.
Hey, Spanners. Speaking of which, got Paul Ricard coming up next weekend. You guys should tune in to that.
Is that GT Tin Top Racing?
It is. It is the International GT Open.
Now, with you commentating, I'll give it a go. And we've got international superstar, DJ, philanthropist, and billionaire Kristian Pedersen. How's it going, Kristian?
I wish. I'm back on the pod, and Matt is back, and I think of that as kind of a reunion.
Yeah, I would go with that. Yeah.
But Matt, I have a question for you, just a short one. You posted a picture of something weird, which a phenomenon I witnessed the other day, where it's like a lot of human male people in colorful dress. They are very thin. I think they're very hungry, and they are like riding about these two-wheeled things in the mountains, and people are screaming at them, whoa, 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 whoa. And eventually one of them will win a meal in Paris.
Yeah.
Why are you watching this?
Well, because that was my former competitive sport when I was younger, and I follow it because it's the only real racing in the world.
And it's quite interesting to see motorsport emulating the kind of the bunch tactics. I saw Formula E, Matt, and they kind of, because they didn't have the energy to get around a street track in, I think, Philadelphia, they were all kind of bunched up like in a, what do you call a big group of cyclists? Do you call it the peloton?
You call it the peloton, or you call it the bunch.
Oh, Depends the bunch. So they were all bunched up like crazy, exactly like cycling for the first 2/3 of the race. And then they had kind of a sprint at the end. But the tactics were like almost exactly like the Tour de France.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just love a race that can be over 1,000 miles long. And it's where I left it last night, because I've not got to the end of today's stage. There was 10 seconds separating the top two contestants after 50 hours of riding. I mean, you just got to love anything that has those kinds of margins for the win.
Okay, good. Well, look, we're a few minutes into the show. Kristian Pedersen has completely derailed it. Check. Matt has squeezed.
Derail your.
Matt has squeezed in a cycling reference. Check. Okay, good. So maybe now we can talk about F1 and the news. Big dirty news. Chris, you're my favourite at the moment. You haven't ruined the show yet.
Thanks, man.
That's okay. Hey, look, here on Missed Apex Podcast, we do have a choice sometimes as to whether to react to news. And we've done the odd breaking news, I think, when Vettel retired, and or if there's some kind of big announcement. But we don't do it very often. And I think in a situation like this, with Nick de Vries getting replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, I knew we didn't have a show for the next 5 days. So obviously a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked apart to death. But the dust has settled now, and I think we can start thinking about what we think the future will hold at AlphaTauri, and also a little bit about the circumstances around the replacement. Because here's my theory, Chris, and I don't think this is particularly tinfoil hat. I think the decision was made to replace Nick de Vries with Daniel Ricciardo before the Silverstone Grand Prix, Christian Horner all but gave it away on the stage, and he said he was trying to figure out who the crowd's favourite drivers were, and obviously he says Hamilton, there's a cheer, Russell, there's a cheer, Norris, there's a cheer, Verstappen, there was a mixed response, and then he goes, well, what if we were to hire Ricciardo? Would you like us then? And you go, oh well, that's obviously the big giveaway. But I think the writing was definitely on the wall when Helmut Marko did that interview saying Christian Horner was right about Nick de Vries and I was wrong because he didn't want him. So this decision never got made on a cold Tuesday morning in Silverstone.
No, absolutely. Obviously, the big kind of headline out of the decision was, we put Daniel Ricciardo in the car this morning for the, I think it was tire test or something after Silverstone. He was driving the Red Bull, and he was so amazing, we decided to put him in the AlphaTauri. That's not quite how it happened. I'm sure it was that was a dotting the I and crossing the T moment.
That's definitely the story they painted, though, isn't it? That they were all sat there, fine, we'll reluctantly give Ricciardo a test after he's been begging. And then there's just one guy with the stopwatch. And as he zooms past the start finishing line, he's trying to get the attention of the other mechanics. Guys, dramatically turns the stopwatch around. Oh my goodness, right, go, put him in the car now. But here's the thing, Matt. He was driving the Red Bull. And he was reporting like, the Red Bull's super quick. Well, no, duh. I got a bit annoyed that people were going, well, it would have been good enough for pole position in Silverstone. Yeah, like on a completely different day with a completely different track state.
And it was a tire test. Do we even know what tires he was driving when he set that time? Were these like the C5s and not the C1s or 3s or whatever they actually qualified on? Do we know the fuel load? No, we don't. There's so many things that are ridiculous about it. The only truth to that is that was probably the last thing they said to him before he hit the track was, if you put in some good lap times for us, the seat is definitely yours. Because they, as Chris alluded to, they've been looking at him in the simulator, reams of data for months and months and months. They have a very good idea of how Ricciardo is performing compared to de Vries at this point.
If I can just pick up on the firing of de Vries, because I've been an advocate for Nick de Vries on this podcast, and
that's okay.
He's a multiple world champion, right? And he did pretty good up until this point, but not being a rookie, being 28 year old, and going up against Tsunoda and given half a year in Formula One and still not doing anything, I think it's completely the right choice to do something else on that seat from Red Bull's point of view. In regards to Ricciardo, don't forget, next year this team will have Lauren Meekes from Ferrari. It will have Peter Bayer from FIA leading the team. They will move their headquarters closer to Milton Keynes, probably in the span of the next 5 years, move the entire team to the UK. They would need like a proper driver in that team to develop it, since they are considering developing the team. So people are probably thinking about Ricciardo in regards to the Red Bull seat, but actually in the AlphaTauri environment, there's some possibilities for him as well.
So other drivers have said, in their opinion, it is incredibly harsh. And I know we've alluded to on the show before about the lack of testing opportunities and the lack of preparation that rookies can have these days compared to the days of infinite testing. But it does track with Red Bull's previous record of being utterly ruthless with their junior drivers. And for me, there are still two drivers that they absolutely dropped the ball on not giving them an F1 shot with. That is Antonio Felix da Costa and Robin Frijns. But I could do a whole show on those two guys. In terms of replacing him with Ricciardo, though, it's interesting because obviously Liam Lawson has been incredibly impressive since leaving Formula 2, racing in Japan in the Super Formula Championship, and everybody was sort of touting him for a potential F1 drive either in the middle of this year or next year. Now it looks like Ricciardo seems to be the preferred option, and that makes sense for the team like AlphaTauri. They weren't going to get rid of an underperforming rookie only to replace him with another rookie driver. They needed a bit more of a known quantity in that seat. The question for Ricciardo now is, how is he going to fare going sort of a step backwards? Because And we've talked about it on the show. The AlphaTauri is one of the worst cars on the grid this year. And we know it's a big struggle for drivers to take the step backwards on the grid. It's why we maybe see drivers not perform to the same level when they move from a top tier team to a midfield team. And in this case, I would call it, towards the back of the grid team. So I'll be really interested to see how he actually fares in that car compared to Tsunoda.
This is what you were telling me earlier, Matt. You were talking about the brake performance.
Well, this is an interesting thing because, in fact, one of the worst qualities of the AlphaTauri is its braking. And if there's anything that our friend Ricky Danny is noted for, it's his late use of the brakes to rotate the chassis and make amazing up the inside bombs on other drivers that are defenseless because they're braking far sooner. And if your brakes don't work very well, then it's going to be kind of hard for him to make progress in that car with that specific weakness.
And what was his major struggle at McLaren as well? The brakes. Indeed. And trying to get on top of that car's handling. So I almost worry we're in for just a repeat of what we've seen before with Daniel Ricciardo.
Or he could be the guy they need to fix the brakes. I know I'm being a bit over positive here, but don't forget one giant element of Daniel Ricciardo, and that is not his nose, that is his PR value.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, I think actually guys from Liberty, people thinking in those terms, have been in contact with teams saying, listen, this guy sells the Netflix series. And having a team like AlphaTauri, who's the team doesn't really hold any PR value at this point. Giving a seat to Daniel Ricciardo, getting him back into the Red Bull family, it will change stuff. It will change Max Verstappen. It will change the Red Bull team as well. Even him driving from AlphaTauri is my point of view.
Well, look, I wonder what the timeline was, because they took on Daniel Ricciardo as in this kind of media role. That had to be after they had hired Nick de Vries, right? That decision had to have been made already, no?
I think so. Yeah. And you know what? De Vries was really flattered, wasn't he, last year in the one race he did
in
that Williams, which was performing quite well that weekend, and it was basically a sit tight in the slipstream. I don't want to, put a negative spin on the job he did that weekend.
Go for it. That's what you want to do.
Everyone treated him like it was the second coming, it just. I never really expected a balls to the wall performance from him when he got the permanent Formula One seat, which he turned down. He had a signed contract with Maserati in Formula E to race this season. So he's lost out on that, and potentially could go back to Formula E, could do the World Endurance Championship now.
So one of the things I want to do before we walk away from Nick, while admitting that, his performance was not all everybody hoped it would be. And in fact, it was more along what it was likely going to be, because I think I would agree with Chris. His performance in the Williams at Monza absolutely flattered him to a very large degree. But the reality of modern Formula One is that the very few people are going to walk in as an absolute rookie. And especially to a car with a different power unit, which the AlphaTauri has, very different to the Mercedes he would have been used to in the simulator, and immediately do a super great job. He had some flashes of being around Tsunoda's performance, but simply didn't have the experience. And I think even Marco said that, if you really want to give someone a proper chance in Formula One these days with the zero testing, it's like 2 or 3 years before you really know what they're up to. That said, Red Bull was in the perfectly happy place of having a very experienced driver, which we've seen work out well for Haas. They brought back Hülkenberg, they brought back Magnussen, and did much better. And they have Ricciardo sitting there. So if De Vries isn't for any reason making them happy, that's an easy swap for them to make. But I do want to make one more point that I don't think anybody has really made directly before I let Chris jump all over me here, which is that Horner never wanted him in the team. how much did that affect the team and how they dealt with Nick all along in terms of how the car was set up, in terms of how seriously they took his feedback and so on and so forth? We had a war there. And I think you could say either person might have won, but the real loser here is Nick, because I'm not convinced he had the 100% chance, because not everybody in management was on his side from the get-go.
And Red Bull has a modicum of young drivers that they have to select from. Half the Formula 2 grid, I feel like, has a Red Bull livery on their car these days, and they're all doing quite well at the moment as well. And I think the most likely candidates, Liam Lawson, who we mentioned, and Ayumu Iwasa, who's sort of in the title hunt this year as well in Formula 2. But they seem to have this real reluctance to actually hire from within at the moment, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me when 5 or 6 years ago, they were having to hire back drivers they'd fired 5-6 years prior to fill their Toro Rosso seats that had, you know, massive openings in them.
I think this is going to be a bit of a false dawn for Daniel Ricciardo, because look, a lot of it at his age, it doesn't make sense. He's not going to come in, go to Red Bull and challenge Verstappen in the time he has left, and he's not going to be able to hang around to wait for Verstappen to retire. And that is now the dream of every Red Bull junior. Every time they hear Verstappen go, oh, I just want a normal life, I just want to do other series, you can see all the Red Bull juniors are rubbing their hands, because they're now fighting for that position for when Verstappen, I don't know, 4 or 5 years' time says, now I'm done, I'm going to be a scuba instructor now. But so for Daniel Ricciardo to go into AlphaTauri, I believe this is fully on the back of his popularity. He is so popular. He is so well loved. He did a great job for them doing all the media and the PR stuff. And they just know from a TV point of view, he's gold. And Kristian made a great point. Liberty Media are putting pressure on Red Bull to like try and hire a driver that will match Verstappen in that car, so that they will always have two good drivers, even if one team is dominating. You know, you look at the Williams days and the Mercedes turbo hybrid era, at least there was still competitiveness because you had Rosberg and Hamilton going at each other. So Liberty Media are getting involved with who is in the teams. So with Ricciardo sitting on the sidelines, Liberty have to be thinking that is just literally money left on the table. Like if you just swap in De Vries and Ricciardo, that is much more cash, much more advertising. People will watch F1 now to watch Daniel Ricciardo, who might have been swinging either way otherwise. But it's a disastrous move from a career point of view. He's going to get beaten by Yuki Tsunoda. He's not going to do well in a car that's not performing well. And I think this is probably going to peter out till the end of the year. So that's my prediction is, oh God, no, should we just save a replay? Let's just save a replay of me saying that. I've clicked the button so you don't have to. But Daniel Ricciardo is one and done as far as this contract goes. Any argument? Oh, Trump is. Oh, and Kristian.
Yeah, first off, certainly all the rumors are telling us that Yuki is more of a Honda driver than a Red Bull driver and might very well be off to Aston for the next set of power unit regulations. So if I'm Red Bull, I'm not necessarily wanting Ricciardo back out of a seat till I'm certain I've got someone who can come in and be a good second driver at Red Bull and at AlphaTauri when he departs.
Plus, Ricciardo is like half the age of Alonso, and he is the only driver who's ever really challenged Verstappen, right?
Early on, didn't Verstappen
No, Spanners, this was the end point.
Okay, so Verstappen versus Ricciardo, if I'm remembering rightly, this is Toro Rosso. And they
Red Bull.
They had 3 seasons together, but Red Bull wasn't competitive at that time. That's why I'm thinking midfield Toro Rosso. But there was big reliability issues in their first season together, and I'm sure Verstappen got a bit unlucky with the reliability. Plus, Verstappen was going through like a Maverick phase, like a Hamilton 2011 type phase, and hitting everything but the safety car. So I'm not sure that was like a comparison you'd really want to lean on to predict the future, given that in the subsequent seasons, like you can't argue, no one can make the case that Verstappen wasn't the faster, better driver out of that driver pairing. And I can't see how has that changed? Has that journey through Renault, through McLaren, through PR, and then pop back out to Red Bull against Verstappen, and now somehow he's he's going to challenge Verstappen again? No.
I'll give you that Verstappen wasn't like the sharp knife he is today at that time.
Yeah.
But the reason why Ricciardo left that team was because immediately he felt he wasn't backed by the team. They were backing Verstappen as their former champion, or the coming champion. I'm not saying he's at Verstappen level at all, but I'm saying he's got something, and he's got something that is I was the one talking up the Vries a couple of months ago, so don't take my word for anything, okay?
I like Daniel Ricciardo, just have to say. Do like Daniel Ricciardo. So if he was to go in there and make AlphaTauri better and work together with Yuki Tsunoda and bring them up the grid, then that would be two drivers doing better up the grid, and I would be happy. I can't see someone dropping in 10 races in to now a formula that is notoriously difficult for people to swap teams and hit the ground running. I'm not optimistic. Sorry, Danny Rick fans. I look forward to being wrong. Okay, I'll ask you a personal question, Matt. Calendars coming up to, it's been released, 2024 calendar. I think something like 24 races on there. Yeah, 24 races. The season starts on the 29th of February. My daughter's birthday, so I've already told her I'm going to miss it. And it ends, gulp, on the 8th of December. So my personal question to you, Matt, is how is the state of your marriage and how do you think it's going to survive this calendar?
It's a good thing my wife can barely stand me because the time apart helps.
Same. Yeah. But obviously, on a more serious note, Chris, like this is a heavy calendar. We've been predicting this for years, but woof, that is a big one.
There's going to be 1 month of the year next year when you cannot watch a competitive live Formula One session. And I know I'm going to get bombarded with the comments saying, oh, you're not a real Formula One fan if you don't want more races. I'm sorry, there is a limit. There is an actual limit. It's 20 races. And I'm sorry, but I am a firm believer in the fact that we should have quality over quantity. And you could happily chuck away a third of these races. No one would miss them.
So that you've got a limit to the amount of F1 races you can watch. Well, you're not a real F1 fan then.
Well, exactly. Somebody, I don't know. You have to quantify it, otherwise people will get upset at you. But I really don't understand. Well, I mean, I do understand from Liberty's point of view because more races means more money. But there is a genuine petering out, I think, of your enthusiasm for a sport when it's on this much and it doesn't always deliver the quality that it should do because it's on terrible racetracks.
A lot of the time it is.
A lot of the time.
But to me, this is like the same situation I have with tacos, where I'm like, of course, 2 tacos is enough. And if someone then gives me 2 more tacos, I'll be like, oh, come on. Don't be silly. But you won't be able to hear those words because I'll already be eating the 3rd and 4th taco. And I think I'm not sure there's a limit to the amount of tacos I will eat, even under protest. I don't know. Kristian, what would your limit be?
That's the best example ever. I'm getting so hungry right now. I have some very good sauces, by the way, but that's for another podcast.
No, well, look, you've never stopped F1 being the topic of this show stop you before. So what's your limit? Do you have a limit?
Well, I looked at the calendar. I think 24 is too much for guys like us who's watching the practices and stuff like that. But if you look at it from maybe broader audience point of view, 24 is not too much if they only watch the races on Sundays or the rerun at night.
That's a good point.
I mean, for that kind of consumer, and I think Liberty is trying to hook into those people just a tiny bit.
Actually,
the problem is, though, when you can't get the calendar to work on a more logistical basis, then you will get everyone tired. I'm not just talking journalists and drivers and teams. It's everyone. It's the entire system will be like in red, DEFCON 4. And I think I would worry about that if I was them. But still, I mean, 24, it's every second week, all year long.
Lots of triple headers.
Complain?
No. Look, I think like Chris says, he's got his limit for the races. I don't think I do for the amount of weekends that F1 is on. I think my family will disagree strongly with that. The only time I reach my limit is when there's these sprint weekends. So with the sprint races, I am finding myself now increasingly just noping out of the whole Saturday. So I'll watch the Friday practice, and like on I know we were doing the karting and stuff for the Austrian Grand Prix, but like I just didn't care. I didn't care what the result of the sprint race was. I didn't watch the qualifying for it, and I can have too much in a weekend, so and that's fine. Look, I can disregard Saturday on a sprint weekend. It's actually quite handy. It's all one big chunk. But I don't think I've got a limit to the amount of races that I will enjoy in a year.
Thing is, Spanners, I checked my phone at the start of this weekend and I was like, oh, thank God Formula One isn't on this weekend. And I feel like that says something about how
you
many
and your rubbish
dang
fandom
races we have at the moment. I mean, they've done a nice job stepping in the right direction with their more regionalization of the calendar. There's a bit of Australasia at the start of the season as well. And then you've got like the North and South American races are a bit together as well, which is nice. But they're still banging on about putting more races onto the calendar and upping it to like 28 or something like that. And I just don't understand how that is at all feasible when you throw in testing and the mandatory summer break and the postseason testing as well. And they're just never going to have a break.
Oh my goodness.
At all.
Yeah, testing's going to start probably, in maybe late January.
Middle of February.
Matt.
Well, I'm sort of halfway tempted to tell you about the latest great sprint ideas they've had. But the thing that interests me about our calendar is that in talking about it, Zach Brown said that there's actually a demand from racetracks for like 30 Grand Prix a year. So I understand from a business point of view, Liberty is looking at the calculation. We can go to these places and get all these new viewers because we put an event there. But logistically, 24 is the maximum. But I think I really kind of tend to agree with Chris. Once you start to get over 20 for the person who's going to sit down and watch everything when it happens, the event of doing that starts to become more of a slog and less of an enjoyment. If you know what I mean, it starts to lose a little bit of the uniqueness once it's every other weekend all the time.
You can't be less or more unique. Just saying. Point of order. I don't normally get to correct anyone on vocabulary, so I just thought I'd go for it. Kristian.
If you look at, I'm always using football, soccer.
No worries. Let's do it.
As like an example of how people react to patterns in how you go about the sport in communicating it. And if you have like Champions League, then you have the what's it called, Euro Champions League, and then you have World Championship, Euro, and then you have like the local league and a local league for an award, right? Everyone is always trying to make new series like the Nordic Cup, whatever. People just can't get it. I mean, it's too much already. You want to go to Champions League or you go to the Euro. Then you want to win your local and you want to win the award, the pokal or whatever you call it, the cup.
The knockout, yeah.
You can't watch all the games anyway. You're not going to watch all the games in the league. You're going to pick some games you're going to watch. And then you're going to watch the Champions League, of course. If you look at Formula One, I know Formula One is Champions League all along, but you can't have 24 Champions League finals. So we need some group matches, group races, stuff like that. I think that is the way Formula One is thinking, at least from a communication point of view, that you have like these maybe 10, 15 races a year. That is really important. Then you have like the other bits. But this will definitely be an enemy to the sprint race, I think.
I love Star Wars. Right?
Again.
Stick with me on this.
No,
stick with me on this.
Matt.
Too late. Done.
No. Look,
lost me.
No,
What?
come on. Right. It's one of my absolute favorite franchises in the entire world, if not my absolute favorite, okay? But when Disney made 5 Star Wars movies in 5 years, even I got Star Wars'd out, okay? Because you had mediocre movies like Solo, which are like a street track in Formula One. You know, no one's asking for it.
Do you know what, Matt? Chris, Futurama, same.
Yeah.
First 6 seasons, mint. Then
Simpsons.
Simpsons. There you go, Matt.
Well, I think I have a convenient solution to this from our past, which is F1 used to run non-championship races. And imagine if those extra 4 races had Formula One teams, Formula One cars, but not necessarily the exact same Formula One drivers, and they didn't have championship points. So you could run your junior drivers in real Formula One events, for example, or you could import someone from IndyCar or someone from WEC to be one of your drivers. I think that's a potential way to go, where F1 as a sport can go to more tracks per year, but the championship that we follow stays contained within, a manageable bundle.
Okay, well, Matt, what you've managed to do there is you've managed to actually move me away from my point more towards Chris's side with that argument. Like, if you started doing any of what you just suggested, F1 would be terrible. Like, I would not want that, and then I would be upset, and I would not tune into all those races.
The sprints, right? We all hate them because they're pointless. You want to add more pointlessness to Formula One.
If they're non-championship, the whole point is you can tune out and you don't miss anything. But for the new markets, they still get Formula One. It solves both problems without aggravating either person.
How the team's going to pay for that? I mean, they already hate the fact that they have sprint races.
They would get a separate budget for it, and they would get data from it, which they would love.
What separate budget? Where's it coming from?
Kristian, the original budget comes from?
You yell now, Kristian.
Sponsors.
Everything budget related is going to change dramatically. The teams are going to be 10 times worth the price they were 2 years ago. They're going to make lots of more money. They can't spend any money. Everything is changing these days. So I don't think you can use economics in regards to this, because everyone's going to make more money and everyone's going to be interested in buying what they got. What I think is very important is what you talked about, Chris, is ruining it. Because Star Wars and Formula One is actually quite similar in some points. There's some magic to it. It don't do that with the head spanners at that. There is, the first time I saw Boba Fett in Star Wars, for instance, I was like, he made my life, basically. And every time I've seen Boba Fett since, it's affected me emotionally. Then they made the Boba Fett series, and they just completely ruined it all. He was made into a plastic figure. It was all about the clicks, just ruined it. And Formula One has this sense of VIP-ness to it, this sense of NASA engineering, gold-plated exhausts, whatever. That glamour could very easily fall away. And that is what they have to look out for, I think, Liberty. That is the gold mine for them.
I love that you're all using Star Wars references thinking that that's good podcasting. No.
Spanners, I'm going to put it into your language.
Okay, please.
Red Dwarf.
Okay.
They've made too much Red Dwarf.
No.
I don't know what that means.
No.
We're going to have a fight.
You're wrong. Just sit there in your wrongness and be wrong. Okay, that's what I want from you right now, Chris Stevens. Okay, look, I have to say, I do feel a bit sorry for some, Formula One staff who've been, doing this a decade or so, and they're kind of sold on this F1 life that it's 16 to 18 races. I know that's going back a fair bit, and then now their lives are probably in different stages. Maybe there's more children, maybe they're married and more settled, and they look at that calendar and they go, well, I can't actually do my dream job anymore. I don't think I can manage this, and they go home to their partners and they look at that together and they say, what is our life looking like with this calendar? Obviously the new people that come in now to Formula One, this is going to be their reality, Chris. Anyone who wants to be an F1 journo, cover Formula One, be in an F1 team, be an F1 driver, this is the reality now. They can't complain, but I do feel a little sorry for, the guys sitting in the teams now going, I've got choices to make.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it with media teams are on rotation now per publication.
Yeah.
Or we've had publications just straight up not send journalists to races because they simply can't afford it anymore. And I think this is all going to come to a head in Las Vegas, because from what I've been told, there is going to be so few journalists actually on the ground in Las Vegas because they simply cannot afford to stay there.
There's going to be a very angry Joe Sayward block, that one.
So I haven't spoken to Joe specifically about Las Vegas. I assume he's going. But over the course of this season, I've spoken to a lot of journalists and I speak to a lot of people who do the kind of thing we do. And so, overall in the F1 landscape, every race is being diluted by having more races. I think each race is worth less to the people who are covering it, and it's getting harder to cover it. we're seeing a lot of pod fade. Woohoo! We're seeing, journalists and media struggling to cover it because the maths isn't going to add up. And what I'm hearing from other content creators, because I was a little bit disappointed that our viewing figures and stuff and our download figures hadn't risen that much this year, but nearly every other content creator I've spoken to has said they've seen a massive drop in the viewing, like per race. So they might have, over the course of the year, the same amount of individuals listening or watching, but I think people are picking and choosing which events they now tune into. So, after those conversations, I feel grateful that our listeners are a bunch of F1 nerds who are addicted to Formula One chronically like we are, which is why we probably haven't seen, any kind of drop off. But I think the effect is real, Chris, out there, and outlets and creators are going to struggle making something of following F1.
100%. I completely agree. I don't know how you do it, because you and Matt are the two people on this show who show in week in, week out. And the rest of us are just on rotation. We do it when we can be bothered.
I'll tell you, Chris, I will tell you. I'll tell you how we do it. And we do it because we have the kind support of our patrons who support us by going to patreon.com/missedapex. Genuinely, literally, we would not be able to do what Chris had described if we don't have patron support. Patron support clears a lot of pathways. So thank you very much. And we've had a big uptick as well, and some new people enjoying our Patreon Slack group. So patreon.com/missedapex.
And if you're subscribing on Patreon, then also subscribe on YouTube.
Oh,
as well.
like and
Click
subscribe.
Yep, like and subscribe. And at MissedApexF1 on Twitter and TikTok as well. You won't regret it. We do good stuff on there. And the patrons, they don't break my heart. But what does break my heart, Spanners, is we're talking about all these extra races, and then they say, how about we do a street race in Madrid? How about we do a street race in Nice as well now? Like, we just fixed Barcelona. Why are we going to a street track in Madrid?
It's rough. Kristian.
I just wanted to thank the patrons. So I'm going to post a picture. Last time I posted like a go-kart thing. This time I'm going to post this is a leak. This is the new merchandise from Mercedes, new race shoes. I'm going to post it now.
You're leaking. Is this an exclusive?
Yeah.
Oh, just for the patrons.
Exclusive. Maybe it's only for Hamilton.
Oh, okay, Hamilton fans.
And if you want to see that leak, then you've got to subscribe on Patreon to get into our Slack group.
There we go.
Thank you very much, guys. It's all there. That looks disgusting. Okay, so let's look at the calendar itself.
Let me just add one thing, Spanner, sorry, in regards to the many races. Don't forget that Formula One is the races, and then it's everything that happens between the races. And things like this podcast, basically journalism as well, all the magazines and stuff like that, that is between the races. That is when the public and our opinions and what we talk about, and that is where the sport gains traction. It could be a great race, whatever happens, but what happens between the races is your public perception. And that is what is worth money. And if you have races all the time, there is going to be no public perception, no podcast, because we don't have time. We can't make money off it because you take all the money to Las Vegas, yada, yada, yada.
Kristian, you feeling okay? That was on topic and relevant. All right, cool. Well, look, one of the biggest complaints I've had about the calendar has been the start of the season for the last 2 seasons has been so street circuit heavy, and then also a lot of tracks where you just can't race and you just can't overtake. From that point of view, I think the calendar, is a big improvement. We've got a couple of Saturday races to start with in Bahrain and Saudi. So the Saudi Arabia race in Jeddah is on a Saturday because Ramadan starts is predicted to start on the 10th of March. So they're doing it on a Saturday, so they're clear of that. And therefore, Bahrain the week before, we think has to be on a Saturday as well because they need 7 days between Grand Prix. So I'm trying to research if that's a real regulation or just but that's the reason why they're on a Saturday. But Bahrain is a great track to kick the season off with. So that's good. No complaints there. Saudi Arabia has been mixed. I mean, it's exciting from a driver point of view and from an onboard's point of view, if not outright terrifying. And then you've got Australia, which is a favourite, and they've made a couple of changes there. But it is, Chris, you're shaking your head, but I promise you that maybe you have to be more like old man. But it's an old man favourite.
No, I know it is because it's been on the calendar since I've been watching Formula One as well. It used to be the season opener when I was watching it, but I do just think it doesn't deliver what we need it to anymore
No.
in terms of exciting racing.
No. So, but if you've got it mixed in with, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia won't be a bad start to the season, I don't think. And then Australia, and then we're back to Suzuka, and that's going to be fantastic, and back to China. So, did you just at Suzuka? Thank goodness for that. Like, I love it. It's one of the best, tracks. I guess, yes, it is a bit tight. There's a bit too much time on throttle, but it's definitely a Formula One classic. And then the Shanghai track is probably one of the best tracks on the calendar. And
I agree with you.
Yeah. So we've got all those 5 races before we have to, endure Miami. And sorry, Miami, but it's not good, is it?
No, you're right.
It's not
just
good.
it's just a slog, isn't it?
Oh no, sorry, Matt. Sorry, I know, Murica.
No, I was going to say the good news is there's at least a 50% chance the entire city will be underwater by the time we get there. So it might be a problem that solves itself.
Okay, no, well, I wish the Miamians well. That feels mean.
It's just reality. Like the city floods an awful lot. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I thought you were just like wishing a specific harm on the people of Miami.
No. The opposite of that. But the reality is it floods an awful lot and an awful lot of water.
But look, the rest of the season, honestly, like that's a much better start. So the 5 races we've mentioned, Miami, it's got its perks, it's got its quirks, it's got its own appeal. Racing isn't specifically one of them, but Imola's good. It'll probably rain there in May, and then Monaco, Montreal, Barcelona, Austria, Silverstone. That is a much better overall start to the calendar, and I'm hoping that that's because they've listened to the negative feedback they've got at the beginning of the last couple of seasons, and how magically that starts to peter away once you go into real racetracks. But anything else, Chris, stand out for you on this new 2024 calendar?
The fact that Abu Dhabi still concludes the season is somewhat disappointing, I think.
Yeah.
It's because it's not. It's a really nice venue, isn't it? It looks fantastic on
People
TV.
who go love it, yeah.
But it's not the proper place to finish a if you want it going down to the wire, like we had in 2021, for example. And let's be honest, 90% of the way through that race, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion of who was going to win the championship. So it wasn't that nail-biting finale that we wanted it to be, like you often get at Interlagos, which to me is always the right and proper championship finale location.
Oh, actually, looking at it, I was trying to be all positive about the start, but actually looking at the end, that's a terrible finish to the F1 season. So we've got Las Vegas, which is guilty until proven innocent in terms of whether or not that's going to be a good race. So you got to say street, city track, temporary circuit, probably not going to be that good. It's probably going to be, a lot like Miami. We might actually lose Singapore because there's been some drama for the Singapore event. Owner is under charges.
So yeah, there has been a bit of corruption apparently in the upstairs of the people who run the event, but I'm told that it won't actually affect the Grand Prix itself. It shouldn't do.
Okay.
But then we do have Austin. That's always a good one.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. So Kota and if you said to me the end of this season now, looking at that calendar, the end of the season could be Italy, Azerbaijan, Baku, Singapore, the least bad out-and-out street track, Circuit of the Americas, I think one of the best tracks on the calendar at the moment, Mexico, but then finishing Interlagos in Brazil, that would be a stonking end to the season. But Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi ending the season could be a bit of a damp one.
I'll tell you the thing about Singapore as well. Are they not still due to have that bit of track cut out and it's just a straight while they redevelop
which bit of track?
Stadium? There's the the plinky plonky final sector where they go right left all the time. That's just turning into a straight because they are building a stadium on the waterfront, and so that bit of track is shut basically. So they're sort of going around it by just creating a straight between that last chicane before the last two right-handers, and I think it's the right-hander after you go over the bridge. You got big braking zone into a sort of hairpin, and then it's just straight all the way down to that chicane, which I think is going to be for this year and next year.
So that'll make it
while they build that stadium.
That'll make it quite Baku-ish then.
But not
my
to
God.
the same extent. It will be a bit lower speed, but it should liven things up a little bit because let's be honest, that last sector's a bit meh.
Early on, there was like a bid for Formula One from Saudi Arabia, and I get it. They have a lot of money in the fund, and but if you look at the calendar, I understand Bahrain in regards to the testing, but then two Middle East races to start the calendar and two Middle East races to stop the calendar. I just find that quite peculiar.
It's more than
the weather thing,
coincidence.
though.
Yeah,
that is the argument, right?
I don't think it's peculiar, Matt, is it? They're going to buy it, so.
It's almost like Formula One is a business and all it really cares about is making money. And we're just lucky to have the sport that's attached to it.
but
I mean,
look,
if not the Saudis, it'll be the Qataris, won't it, that buy it, I think, inevitably.
yeah, so I think obviously Liberty Media was saying, no, it's not for sale. We've got this long-term future. But everything they're doing, to me, looks like well, milking the cow might be a bit harsh, but I think that it looks like now it's the extraction phase. This is the harvest now. Liberty Media have grown. They've sown the seeds. They're harvesting now. And then I think it will end up, there's, like Kristian is saying, there's a lot of clues on the calendar as to where Formula One ownership will end up. If you also look at the calendar being structured around Ramadan as well, I expect that to go further. So there's a break between Saudi Arabia and Australia. So Australia and Japan are just at the end of Ramadan. But I would not be surprised if we end up seeing a month-long gap in future seasons, much like, obviously, Christmas. We don't race over Christmas. But if that's going to be the way forward, rather than start the season, then have a month break, just start the season in April, go to the Southern Hemisphere during December, and then finish the season off in January or something.
As far as I know, the race is going to be on a Saturday in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, it will be, yeah.
So let's just break all the norms because someone paid for it to be there at that weekend. The end.
Yeah. So I mean, look, golf lost, didn't it? And maybe F1 will go the same way. Right. What should we do, Matt? Shall we argue about things, or shall we talk about Domenicali and the teams? Why don't you take us away on Domenicali's refusal to entertain new teams on the grid? Because I spotted you and Kristian having a back and forth over that earlier.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. We know that the FIA is about to approve 2 new entries to the sport, likely to be the high-tack entry and the Andretti entry. But there's word coming out that just because the FIA approves them doesn't mean that FOM is going to actually let them on the grid. And Domenicali, ever the diplomat, is like, well, they're going to have to show they're bringing something super special for us to let them on the grid. And to me, this is interesting because it seems like he's forgotten that it's the FIA that own the sport, and it's just the FOM, currently in the form of Liberty, that are renting it. And yes, I did steal that from someone. Thank you. And I'm just staggered. How could you not want more teams on the grid? We have drivers without rides. And how is it going to be bad for AlphaTauri to have someone to actually fight with for a change?
So I don't necessarily think teams need to bring something amazing and special and spectacular to the, because why? Like what?
Funding. Right?
Yes, it's money. That's all you
Show
need.
me you have the money to run a team, and then we're good.
What does Haas actually bring to the table apart from being an American team? What does AlphaTauri actually bring to the table apart from, in terms of being something special? What does Williams bring to the table in terms of being something special?
Hurts.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, but they're not these spectacular entities, are they? They're just teams, and we need more teams on the grid because we're constantly talking about amazing drivers who don't get a chance to have a seat in Formula One because there just aren't enough seats.
I think Matt, if that was to be wrong, and I think your thing to be in a fair world, they would only need to be better than Haas and Williams to deserve a place in F1. The thing now is, I think this is the closed shop franchise F1 that we were talking about years ago, and I think it was obvious when Liberty Media came in that that's the way they were going to go. And now Haas, it does not matter if they finish 10th. Really, are they going to pour resources and blood, sweat, and tears to go 9th to get that extra bit of that extra little bit of championship points? why are Haas in F1 now and not selling? Because Andretti said no one is selling. Why is no one selling? Because it's a guaranteed profit every month. So because they know there's no risk, they can just sit there. And I think that could be the death of like competition in the midfield, because Williams, Haas, AlphaTauri can just sit there, and it does not matter if they are consistently 8th, 9th and 10th every year, Matt. And is that what you get in your American sports?
Well, we do to a point, but then when they're worth enough extra money, they have this thing called, get ready, expansion. And they add new teams to the league in different new cities so that more people become interested. And I think really the game was given away with this quote where Domenicali says, it's not the money, as we have said. Well, no, it is the money, because remember the fee that the teams have to pay to get on the grid now? It's like $200 million. Well, pretty much the existing teams want to add a zero to that because the TV numbers have gone up so much and because the general public interest has gone up so much. What they're trying to do is close the door they walked through and not let any new teams onto the grid until they can add another zero to that number and protect their shareholder wealth and do their fiduciary duty, which is all a bunch of hoo-ha, they say, when they don't want to have to actually do their jobs and be competitive to make money as Formula One teams.
So being the 10th team in 1995 is the same as being the 10th team in 2023. But the difference is these days, there's sometimes less than a second between number 1 and number 10. So I think everything has changed dramatically. It's a completely different sport from a competitive point of view. Everyone is so close together. I don't think a little bit of extra competition. And as someone saying, we have enough of the people not winning. We need more teams winning, but to have more teams winning, we need someone to be even worse than number 10 right now. And just new drivers in, things happening, more cars on track. The tracks are so big these days, and the cars are going to get a little bit smaller as well. I don't see anything wrong with 24 cars on the road. I mean, 28 wouldn't be a problem for me.
Exactly. More cars on the grid is never, ever going to be a bad thing, especially like in the early 2010s when we had, the Caterham and the Marussia and the HRT. They in themselves provided some great battles. Spiker. And I will always remember in 2012, like everyone's focusing on Alonso versus Vettel for the title, but then further down there's their own like vital championship fight happening between Marussia and Caterham. And to the point about like the two biggest prospects at the moment seem to be High Tech and Andretti, who seem well funded and are definitely credible as race teams. Yeah. I mean, Andretti's got a massive history in American sports car and single-seater racing. And today, Jake Dennis put one hand on the Formula E World title as well in the Andretti car as well. So I just don't see why we can't just... Well, I mean, we all know why common sense won't just prevail in this. But it's such a shame that we're not letting this happen because it would be amazing.
It is absolutely all about the money, and it always will be to a certain extent in Formula One. But I have a secondary question, which is if we were to expand to 12 teams, should we change the championship points to go down to P12 because that's still half the grid?
Absolutely not.
What? No, of course.
No, why?
Why not?
Would you want a consolation prize? It's supposed to be a degree of excellence to scoring a point.
I'm sorry, it's simple math. Right now, half the drivers score points, half the drivers don't. If we expand the grid, shouldn't half the drivers still score points? It seems like a reasonable question from my side of the pond here.
Let's do some more maths then. Okay, when there were 24 cars before, it was still only 10 teams or 10 drivers that were scoring.
And that was
points.
Worse. It was wrong.
And back in the 90s when we had 26 cars and it was only 8 drivers scoring points as well. Why do we have to have it?
Chris, you're making us all feel old now because we can all remember only 6 drivers scoring points.
But only 8 teams ever finished, so it really wasn't the issue you're making it out to be.
Kristian.
I think we should make it exciting to fight for 12. And I think we should make it exciting to fight for 18th. And I mean, why fight for 18th? Why destroy your tires? Why maybe break a front wing on the third last lap or whatever? I mean, it should count all the way through down the field. I know, of course, the winners should gain more and the fastest lap and stuff. Fastest lap for everyone should count. It shouldn't be always Checo just pitting on the last lap and doing his fast. I mean, it's so unexciting. Everything in the field should be exciting. Everyone's brought their A game. Everyone's brought their, as we talked about, gold-plated exhaust. So why not reward everyone with what they're entitled to?
This is my favorite when Chris is like this wrong, but he's passionately wrong. So he's going to keep pushing the wrongness, which is great because it's good content. It's nice to have a back and forth. I'm very open-minded. So if you have points all the way down, you can't just say, right, well, because it's always been this magic special thing to get a Grand Prix point, that must be the way to go forward. There's much more attention now on the teams. There's a lot more fans of drivers down the bottom end. I'm not sure in the 90s as many people could name the entire F1 grid as can now. So, look, it doesn't have to be 25 points for a win. That's just been a quite recent and somewhat arbitrary number. It could be 100 points for a win. It could be 18 times 4, whatever that is, for a second place. And then once you get below 10 points, it could become a very small amount of points. So it's a very small amount of points where you're unlikely to be competing and ruining things up front. But it's enough to differentiate. I want to know who's been doing better over a season, who's the 16th and 17th best driver. I'd love to see that information.
You still see that because they still occasionally score points, and which is a mark of excellence. But Spanners, when you told the story of that, dad race that you were in, not recently,
not publicly, at my son's sports day.
You talked about it on the show.
No, I think on the Patreon pod. I don't think I said it on the show.
Oh, okay, sorry, but.
Okay, so...
You want to tell the story now?
No. I was at my son's sports day, and they would say, there's a parents' race, so who wants to get involved? And then I looked, I didn't really, but then I thought, I'm going to get injured. So anyway, I saw that they were one person short, and they were like begging. I went, okay. I'll go and do it. What I didn't realise is they then put us up against a team of the PE teachers, and a team of the year 8s, and a team of the year 9s. And obviously, so the two dad teams came dead last. And my team was so far behind when I got the baton that I received that sarcastic applause that you get for like just trying, at the end, like, oh, look at him trying, look at his little face, he's still trying. Yeah, what's the point? Why
do you want to do that for Formula One drivers? Really?
Are you comparing fighting for points for 13th to me flopping my way down the 100-meter track at my kids' sports day? Oh, Matt, it's harsh.
It is, and since I haven't apparently fomented enough chaos into the points yet, I have a further proposal, which is based entirely on vibes. I think the distance between first and second place is now, in these days of uber reliability, entirely too much.
Too big.
Yes.
And I say we bring it down to make life more interesting for everybody.
Yeah, like 20 points for second place or something like that. So it's only a 5-point difference rather than a 7, which is probably actually too big when you consider the previous point system before 2010. It was 10 and 8.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is my thing. I would love to shrink the distance between first and second place to something like, if like you said, maybe 4 points or 5 at most, with the fast lap floating around to make life more interesting then.
So 100 points for the winner, 98 points for second place. Okay, we're making progress now, Kristian. We're making progress.
I think one of the reasons why they changed it was you could basically win all races all year, and then the other guy coming second could win it one and then be champion. So you had to do something about the points, so it would, if you won all the races or half the races or was champion, it would reflect so.
Yeah,
in the
wins
points.
Should be.
And I think this debate is also always returning when someone is riding away, like Hamilton did or Verstappen do right now. Then this comes up because we're just so bored about it. We need to do something. What can we do? I don't think the points are the way to go, though.
Well, maybe, but like the point you're saying is like we are all switching off to Verstappen at the front, and we're looking further down the field for our entertainment. And sometimes you see a good battle, and you go, "Oh, that's not for any points." So why, what's the incentive? True. And you'll remember Alonso, who anytime he was like 12th or below in the McLaren, he would suddenly be like, "Oh no, there's a vibration," because he basically didn't want to finish 12th.
The thing is, for me, I know you, Kristian, you say, oh, why am I going to risk anything if I'm only in 18th? Because you may as well just pack up and go home and never race a car again.
That's what Alonso was doing. That's what Alonso was doing at McLaren.
I know, and I absolutely hated that he did that, because that is just, for me, just pack up and go home. And he kind of did, frankly, for a little while, didn't he? He just went and tried something else. I just think that says so much about you as a racing driver, that you would just be so willing to give up. Remember when
but Chris, imagine we're at end of season. We have Haas, we have Alfa Romeo fighting, and none of them have points. We still want to know who did best, but the points doesn't reflect anything because they both have 0. So
look into it.
Yeah, I know, but that is not the way the sport works. It's not for the looking into it. It's for everyone to understand it immediately.
Yeah. You know they're not very good because none of them have scored points.
You know how we were just talking about how amazing our patrons were? Well, I have an idea from our patron chat from Morgan, who suggests that if you go 2 straight seasons in Formula One without scoring a single point, you should be banished from the sport. What do we think?
I mean, in today's format, that kind of works.
Yeah, so that's one vote.
But not if we have 24 cars on the grid and we keep the current system.
But what if we put the points down to 12? Then maybe that would be fair after all.
No, because, do you remember when Manor scored points? Like twice they did it in their entire tenure in the sport. Do you remember how ecstatic and emotionally vibrant and amazing those moments? They might be few and far between, but they are.
But Chris, you will still get this. You will just get the right points. There will still be a fight at the last race for that 1 point.
I always get guys like I'm not this fan of antiquity and tradition at all. I always say do the best solution, not just pick a solution because it's always been. Are you really saying we can't have a better point system for the sake of 2 moments where Mana scored a point? That feels like too little of a return on investment to me to make me go, oh no, you're right.
Oh my God, was it? I'm going to have to agree with you here, Spanners.
Oh
what
no,
have you done?
Sorry about that. When was that? When was the last time? When did Mana score a point? 2012?
No, they scored points in. Okay. Oh God, what was it? 2014.
Okay, so 10 years ago, Chris.
Monaco. And then Verline scored a couple of points in Austria 2016. Okay.
Well, we can't have me and Matt agreeing for too long. So let's argue about tyres. Okay. So I would say, Matt, you're actually a Pirelli supporter. Like you seem quite always supportive of what they do and defend them. And I think you get what they're going for.
Well, I do. And fundamentally, I feel like they are never given the cards to properly defend themselves, just based on the way testing for tires and the way everything else works. They're always catching up with reality from a point of a great deal of lag. So I do tend to cut them slack because they attempt to do what the FIA asks.
Okay, so
if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So here's my argument. I understand the task they've been given to do, which is to create tyres that will wear in a certain fashion so that they can be used as part of the strategy. And I'm also very sympathetic to the fact that they don't want their tyres blowing up every 5 minutes or falling apart completely, because this is why I don't overreact in the media too much. The whole chocolate tyres thing killed what everyone was excited about initially about the Pirelli tyres, which was the 3-stop and 4-stop, which is possibly a little bit too far. But because they went around saying Pirelli has chocolate tyres, these tyres are ridiculous, that hurts Pirelli's reputation. And I feel now they wanted to protect that by showing they had durable tyres that did the job, that just there was a slight margin in the times between an old tyre and a new tyre. And that's what protected them. But I think they've gone way, way, way too far now. They had to increase the strength of the sidewall, which I think at the time we were like, yeah, but that won't increase the wear. But the tyres they came out with at Silverstone, can we at least agree that shows Pirelli have just misstepped in this direction? They've gone too hard. They've gone too hard wearing. And now in a formula which is nearly entirely designed around this kind of tyre strategy and tyre wear, teams build their cars to the Pirelli tyre wear. What we saw at Silverstone doesn't match that. And actually, Silverstone, which is a cracking circuit that produces great racing, was saved by a safety car. We very nearly had hordes of people from Reddit calling Silverstone boring, and that would have been a problem. And I think this lands on Pirelli.
Well, I think it tends to land more on the physics of the racetrack at Silverstone. I don't think they could have brought softer tires to this particular race.
Why?
Well, it's pretty simple. Silverstone, of all the tracks that we go to, puts the most amount of energy, specifically laterally, into the tires. And that puts the most stress onto that sidewall that you previously mentioned. And you may remember them saying, yeah, it looks like the teams are like a little faster and stuff. So maybe we bring some 2024 tire technology. And they had tests and they said, not going to affect the performance, but the tires will be stronger. And having said that, when we showed up to the actual race, the front tire pressures, which no one will know what this is unless you're really into the minutiae of tires, were 26 PSI, which is about 3.5 more than you usually see the front tires at. And that's with the brand new tires. So what does that really mean? What that really means is that back when the FIA said, oh, we're going to raise the floor to solve the bouncing problem, and that's going to hobble the downforce creation of the teams enough that we don't have to worry too much about the tires. It just means they were completely wrong about that. And the teams are producing a huge amount of downforce. They're going much faster than anyone predicted. And Pirelli at Silverstone was just hanging on with their fingertips, hoping to not have like that repeat of Lewis finishing his last lap with 3 tires and everyone pitting at the end because they thought their tires were going to blow up.
That was so good, though. That was so good. If you weren't watching, what year was that? Was that 2020?
20 or 21, maybe. One of the two.
2020, because there were 2 Grand Prix that year at Silverstone, weren't there? Because
it would be 2020 then.
One,
yeah.
And that was when Lewis won on 3 wheels, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was go and search that. Go and search Lewis Hamilton 3 wheels Silverstone, and to watch that lap countdown. Because it was the front left had gone, so he was really trying to manage that, and then Verstappen was closing down, and just listen to the radio communication between his mechanic Lewis Hamilton and Bono, and they were just really calmly counting down the gap, because I think it came from like 20 seconds back or something, and by the end it was like 2 seconds, and like the calmness of it, and then just go, how do you adapt your racing style to suddenly do the fastest available lap on 3 wheels? That has got to be one of the most underrated drives of all time to bring it over the finish line. I know that car was a beast, but still, he couldn't just limp home back to the pits. He had to push on 3 wheels to win. Go and look that up. So, Matt, I don't think we're disagreeing too much at the moment, but Kristian might change that.
I'm not going to disagree because, I just think it's 26 PSI is a lot,
It is.
That's a lot.
It's too much.
Normally it would be around like 20. I remember when from go-karting, on karts, the wheels are a lot smaller, of course, but your PSI is around like you play around 7.5, 8.5 around that area. That's like nothing. So 26 is a balloon hardly inflated. And if you race on a balloon, everything's just gonna be, not good.
The problem is it's not a balloon, it's a rock.
Yeah, exactly. So what Pirelli is doing is they are trying to do a tire which can follow the trend in Formula One. And if they have to update the tire halfway through a year already, that is because they have reached their PSI limit. So then they have to introduce a new tire, which is hard, and then they can turn down the PSI. You have a more flat tire. For people not understanding this, basically the power in the tire, it wants to go, the car wants it to go sideways while going straight ahead. So it's around like 1.5 ton that wants to go sideways.
Oh, in a corner.
At every corner, sometimes doing 250 kilometers an hour. That is just a whole lot of power. And if it's inflated to 26 PSI, that is going to change the entire behavior of the tire as well. So it's just a lose-lose for Pirelli, isn't it? I mean, how can they ever win this?
Yeah, and the thing here to consider, and why I fundamentally disagree with Spanner, is about the compound choice here. is if they had brought grippier compounds, from a wear point of view, they might have lasted. But a grippier compound gives you even more what they call lateral acceleration, or that sideways force, which stresses the sidewall even more. So you would either have to have even higher pressures,
which you can't,
or
you've maxed out.
You get to a point where your sidewall will fail because you have too much lateral acceleration. And that's why I think they chose these specific compounds as being the ones they knew would survive the physics of this racetrack.
I think also maybe we should think about changing the narrative. So maybe Pirelli should be communicating, this tire is made soft, and you're not allowed, if you go more than 20 laps on this tire, there's no guarantee. So everyone's doing it, or if the tire blows up, it's because of the team.
Well, that kind of was where we were at. I mean, if you look at Baku 2021, that's a good example of that, Matt.
Or Vettel at Spa when he was racing Grosjean, blew his tire up, not wanting to change it.
Yeah, but still the headline is bad tires by Pirelli.
Exactly, by Pirelli,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's the narrative we have to change, I think.
Okay, and the issue is here, Matt. Okay. So we painted the picture of them sort of doing what they feel they need to do. I still think they're being conservative to protect reputation, and I can't blame that from a business point of view. They've had a lot of unfair criticism over the years. But these cars are designed around managing the tyre and tyre wear. When you take that away, it actually becomes like a completely different formula. Why was the Silverstone grid and the order so much different to what people were expecting? How come McLaren, who'd been struggling with tyre wear, suddenly were able to look really competitive up at the front? It's a major decision to go onto this new type of tyre, and it has absolutely just, it's kind of, apart from Verstappen up front, it's kind of turned the season on its head in a not dissimilar way to 2013.
Well, the problem here is we also have the massive update from McLaren complicating the issue. Yeah. We don't know if it was just
We'd love
tires.
To take that factor out, yeah.
Yeah, but having said that, I would expect at any other racetrack to see much more representative pressures. And that may really have had a lot more to do with sort of the unusual performance of a lot of the teams. In the sense that you'll have a contact patch that's much more the normal shape, and the tire will have much more its normal thermal performance, because I know there were a lot of teams struggling with overheating. And it just, again, this is like the short-sighted thing, is that the problem really is at Pirelli, and the FIA massively underestimated how much downforce the teams were going to claw back over the off-season. So much so that they've essentially moved their tire development cycle 6 months forward. And that is the problem that really needs to be solved before we can get into the, well, why didn't you bring the 3-4-5 instead of the 1-2-3, for example?
Yeah, my fear is, Matt, it's just going to, if they stay down this conservative path, and let's hope not. Let's hope this was a glitch. I think Formula One isn't set up to provide exciting, entertaining races around a mega hard tire that doesn't wear anymore. It's going to drive complaints. So if that's the way they're going for the rest of the season, I do kind of fear for, I fear for the Reddit forums. That's who I'm worried about.
Yeah, no, and I understand, but like in terms of things that I think about, like look at the weather. On Friday, look at how hot it was. On Sunday, look at how cool it was. That has a major impact. And I think, if I'm not wrong, they brought the same tires, the 1-2-3, but the one they brought this year was actually a better performing and softer C1 tire than they had last year. So it's not like they made no effort. But I think I would agree with you. They are very conservatively bounded in that they don't want to bring a tire that's going to fail on a lot of cars. And that's going to be their bottom line.
Okay. So, look, we're used to a formula where tires are a real integral part of the strategy. But of course, in the long ago, in the before time, they used to have a thing called refueling. And we get a lot of people bring refueling back. And we get a lot of newer fans asking why refueling shouldn't be introduced into Formula One. And we haven't spoken about this for a while. But firstly, is there anyone on the panel who would welcome a return of refueling in Formula One? And that's looking like a stoic no. So I'm glad we're all on the same page there, Chris.
Crickets.
Yeah, exactly. No. I assumed that. And I think it's a fair question to ask, because the refueling did add a tactical element. It's just that the viewer was not privy to it at all. So you'd go like, oh, wow, Webber's doing really well. And then it would turn out after 10 laps, like, no, he just didn't put any fuel in qualifying to go on pole. Aside from the danger side of it, it just really meant that you couldn't tell what was going on in a race until about 10 laps from the end, until everyone had finished refueling. And what you had was the commentators with a little stopwatch trying to time how long the fuel pump had been attached to estimate how much fuel had gone in, to see whether they were going to go the rest of the race or whether they were going to do a little short sprint and then refuel again. Kristian, not even you, not even old man Pedersen wants a return to refueling.
No, but I would like if we on screen had tire pressure and we had the amount of fuel in each car.
Yeah.
I mean, all these sorts of information should be available to the public, so it would be much easier for us to judge the race, as it would have been back in the days if everyone knew that this car is starting on 1 liter of fuel, etc.
Chris, it works really well in Formula E. Like in the first race we were watching in Rome, and Jake Dennis made a real charge up front in race 1, but we could see that he had 3% less, and we could see that the early leader had 3% less. So you go, okay, you can put that into context straight away, and having that information in Formula E is actually like really cool.
Yeah. But that's because it's like such a fundamental part of strategy in Formula E. It would be like not knowing what compound of tire a driver was on in Formula One. So that's kind of really vital. It does make me laugh when we talk about where we should have a graphic for this, that, and the other thing. Because do you remember at the start of the hybrid era, they were like, yeah, we're going to have all this stuff that shows you the deployment and how much they're saving. And it lasted for all of 3 races?
That was
they just gave up on it.
That was a really, really big push from Liberty Media and Rob Smedley, who was on this show talking about it. They were really trying to bring more of that information to Formula One. And that's the era of all the replays as well, showing more of the onboard, showing the reaction times. Do you remember reaction times was going to be a big thing? And that's kind of melted away.
Still do it, yeah. But now they're on about,
Oh.
If they show like the replay at the start, they'll normally put like in the corner reaction time.
Oh, I've missed that then.
Driver. Yeah, because you're too busy looking at your blooming timing screens. I keep telling you that all they do is distract you. But one thing they're also doing at the moment, I think because they trialed it in Formula 2 last weekend.
Oh,
and
yes,
they'll be putting it on the car for Hungary is the heart rates, which I think is really interesting because I remember seeing this on the Isle of Man TT coverage, and you watch them as they build up the speed coming up the mountain course, and they're doing 200 beats per minute.
Oh my goodness. I'd never introduce that into Missed Apex karting, because I can just see like my kids and my wife going, oh no, bring him back, bring him up, what's he doing? Because I don't know if you've ever seen me come off from karting, but like I treat it like a full like pump, and I've got a big blueberry face and like dripping. I've lost half my body weight in water by the time I finish karting. Never ever show my body metrics. No one will let me race again. Matt?
Well, to me, I miss still the tire cameras. Remember the FLIR cameras that showed you the tire temperatures?
Oh, the thermal cameras.
Yeah, they were cool.
I loved those. And the teams got rid of them very rapidly because they realized they didn't want the other teams seeing what their tires were up to. And I think a lot of the metrics that we would be most interested in have gotten banned for exactly the same reason. The teams don't want that information being made public. And it's always a battle, I think, that Formula One, the business, is going to have to fight a bit. Because if it was up to the teams, we would know nothing ever about anything. But knowing nothing, how much would we enjoy the sport?
There should be this rule that when you leave the garage on Friday morning, FP1, everything should be told. You cannot have any secrets. So your tire pressure, your everything, even the driver's condition. So, and you cannot hold back. Photographers, you have to, if someone asks you about an item on the car, you have to say what it is. I mean, currently we have these things where, well, that was the intent at least. Before each race on Friday, they put up all the cars, and everyone has to put out a statement with whatever they made of changes to the car.
Yeah.
And Red Bull just didn't care. They just didn't put anything in there. And I think some of the teams started out by writing down everything. And then when they realized no one else did it, things just got forgotten. There's something wrong about having secrets in a sport that is about us watching it. You can't combine those two things, I think.
just last thing on the refueling for me really is that we have to trade in some safety, because right now we've got mechanics changing tires in 2 seconds, and that occasionally leads to mechanics getting hauled off by a wheel gun or a loose wheel rolling down pit lane. And then if we go to refueling, then the tire changes will obviously slow down because the limiting factor is going to be the fuel going in. But then, suddenly we introduce a risk of people catching on fire. And if there's one group of people who will very sternly say no to refueling, it's going to be pit lane reporters. Because right now, Ted Kravitz can wander down pit lane in his shorts and sandals, but if they bring back refueling, he's going to have to suit up with the overalls like they do for endurance racing, and it gets hot in those things. So
I would think the mechanics also being the ones catching on fire might have something to say about it too.
But they're used to it. They're used to being in those, the Nomex and all that.
The Patreon live chat is having a chat about viewer heart rates. So maybe we do that for a live watch along at some point, because
oh my God, yeah.
So we all sit here with like our resting, heart rates at the beginning, and I'm scared actually to think of what my heart rate is as the lights are going green, even after whatever it is, 30 odd years watching Formula One, like especially the Silverstone Grand Prix, which holds a special place in my heart. I was like buzzing all day for that, and by the time the start came around, I think my heart was like exploding out of my chest. Like I feel a genuine grip of like anxiety and excitement. I know that sounds stupid for a 42-year-old like watching race cars on TV, but I still get that. And then when Norris overtook Verstappen, oh my goodness, like you have the 999 on it. I know it's only 3 numbers, but it's worth having it on a pre-dial because Chris 9, you've got to dial all the way round on the dial,
and you got to wait ages.
Got to wait for it to go all the way back. 9 all the way like that. So I still am like that, and I think people would be worried for my health if they saw the live heartbeat and blood pressure at the start of a Formula One race. But we could do it. We could do it.
On iPhones now, there's like an automatic call the emergency services if it thinks you've been in a crash. Yeah. That thing would be dialing 999 every day if I had one of those, just from watching any kind of racing, really.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that. I don't think we should do that. But we have got Hungaroring coming up next week, and so quickly then from Matt, do you think Pirelli will, for want of a better term, get it right for Hungaroring? Can we expect a more normal tyre strategy, although Hungaroring does tend to be a one-stop anyway?
I mean, I don't know. I could go look and see what the actual tire allocation is and tell you what compounds they've chosen. I don't think they've been any more conservative than they normally are. Will it yield a 2-stop? It's Hungary. Probably not.
Prediction.
You don't really have any high-speed cornering in. I mean, you have a lot of medium, but no high speed cornering at Hungary.
And because it's quite hard to overtake, that naturally pushes teams to want to one stop anyway, because you're going to struggle to get through the field if you're put into traffic. So I think the only way we would see a 2-stopper is if we see like what we saw with Hamilton Verstappen a few years ago, where if you've got 2 cars that are so far clear of anyone else that they can try and recuperate that gap without anybody in between them. But in terms of like the fight we're expecting, because it's so close between Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston and McLaren now, I think we're going to see quite a natural one-stopper.
According to the BBC, Matt, the Budapest on Sunday is going to be 30 degrees with a gentle breeze.
Well, should be reasonable track temperatures, nothing under, probably under 50 then, I'd guess, if it's 30 ambient. And managing the tires. I'm interested to see how McLaren goes there, because Silverstone is a representative track. You sort of have all 3 different speeds of corner, but it's very, very focused on the high speed and the high speed change of direction. But we know, for example, Mercedes was really quick in the very low speed stuff. And we don't have the long straights that tend to benefit the Red Bull with their super efficient DRS.
It could be a Hamilton track. Just saying.
it just, I don't know. I'm saying this is, I'm genuinely curious to see how the teams sort out, minus Max, who will probably be fastest because he apparently always is going to be fastest this season. But I think there's a lot of interesting unanswered questions going into Hungary. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a big swing in team performance as a result of that.
Hungaroring is one of my favorite tracks on the calendar traditionally, even though it is quite narrow and twisty. It is nearly exactly like your average indoor kart track. It's the indoor kart track of Formula One, in that large parts of it are just completely unpassable. However, on those local tracks, there is always there's the one passing point. So basically, they follow the leader all the way around to the back straight, and then they charge down to a long, technical, almost Luffield-esque right-hand hairpin, but you come into it at a high speed. And then there's opportunities then to go into turn 2 as well and fight into turn 2. And then generally it's done. By the time you go up the hill to the left-hander turn 4, the overtaking's finished, and then they have to wait again to come back to that track. But it always does provide some racing action through turn 1 and turn 2.
What you get is good battles.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite exciting in and of itself, even if the pass doesn't always necessarily come off. And then if somebody does get past you, then it was like highly skilled.
And you get Bottas taking everyone out in T1.
Yeah, exactly.
And just think, and this year, because he's further back down the grid, he's got so many cars in front of him.
Exactly.
The opportunities are
a prime weekend.
I was in Budapest a few weeks ago for GT Open, and we all thought about this, being like, it's hardly a name drop.
No. I was in Budapest in motorsport work. I'm Chris Stevens.
Yeah, I mean, it's my job, but we were kind of going into it expecting the same thing. We're like, oh, it's not going to be much action. And then, it was sort of pedaling along nicely. But then the conclusion of the race was absolutely immense. That came down to a driver at the last corner on the last lap going round the outside for the lead of the race. And, my co-commentator lost his voice basically at the end of that. So it can do good stuff, I think.
Yeah,
it's going with some positivity.
And hey, look, we always encourage people to watch other racing series here on Missed Apex podcast, and we're proud of our own little racing series that we put on. And of course, we've been karting at Missed Apex. We've been karting at Brighton Karting, and there'll be a video of that coming out shortly. But you can watch us iRacing with Chris Stevens as our commentator, and that was all exciting. So we'll put links into the show notes below there.
Do you have Verstappen on that server as well?
No, because our Sim Racing League has certain rules and codes of conduct.
Okay.
We're not fans of revenge punts. If you missed it, look, Max Verstappen. I wasn't planning to talk about this at all, but he's in an endurance race. He gets tangled with a driver. They kind of trade. They trade blows. Another driver hits Verstappen into his teammate. So Verstappen has a complete moment of red mist, and this is on the iRacing service, and you can go look it up.
It was like Monza 21, basically, right?
Oh my god, no, it was worse. It was worse than Monza, but it's in the virtual world. But you can know it's total red mist, and what Verstappen does is, comes over Radion down the Kemmel Straight, completely skips the Lecombe chicane, and then goes and punts the driver off, like completely deliberately. Cuts the corner to gain the 5 places he needs to then kind of revenge punt off. And look, a lot of people are saying it's just a game, but Max Verstappen does not treat that sim racing as just a game. He takes it very seriously, as we all do on Missed Apex podcast, and we try and treat it as close to real world racing as possible, because for us it's a bit of, it's make believe and pretend, just like anyone playing Sunday League football. But that's what people don't get. They think, it's like playing the F1 2021 game. I would say that sim racing leagues, like we run, are every bit as taken seriously as a hobby as Sunday League football, as going down to the tennis courts. So I think all the people participating in that would have been taking it seriously as well. So it was a bit of a moment from Verstappen. If you want to go and see what he's capable of, I will say it was one of the most skillful revenge punts I've ever seen, because he had to leave the track, go across the grass, and then rejoin. But look,
he had 30 seconds to think about it. That is what amazes me. He did it so perfectly.
Yeah. But Max Verstappen's passion on the sim racing is equal to his passion, I think, in real life racing. I don't think he sees a major difference between the two in terms of his approach. So I'm sure some people are going to say, you only have to look at my Twitter feed. Some people will say I have painted an unfair picture of that, But all I'll say is that conduct wouldn't go down very well with Richard Molden, our race controller on the iRacing series. And you can go and check out what we do by clicking a link that Matt will handily provide in the show notes below. Thank you for hanging out with us for this new show. You can't follow Kristian Pedersen, so we can just thank him for his appearance, and he's noped out of all social media. You can go and follow Chris at Chris on Racing on Twitter and Threads, presumably.
Yeah, I'm on Threads.
Yeah, follow us all on Threads. It seems to be going okay. It's nice. I've enjoyed being on there. Follow Matt at MattPT55 everywhere, and me at Spanners Ready, and I'm on the Threads and the Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, actually. I'm trying to post more on Instagram as well. And all those links will be in the show notes. And I wasn't joking before. The patron support, patreon.com/missedapex, is really what keeps us going. And this past week, we have had a bunch of patrons sign up and join and support us. And I had like a real moment of, okay. Because there's always a turnover. People come and go with the patrons. So that nice spike kind of really reassures us that we can keep planning into 2023, into 2024. So patreon.com/missedapex if you want to encourage this silliness. Until we see you next, work hard, be kind, and have fun. This was Missed Apex Podcast.